What would you do if the person you spent months trying to forget walked back into your life, not as a stranger, but as the one thing standing between you and the future you planned? This story is proof that real love rarely arrives on time, and that the wait, no matter how painful, can be exactly worth it. The morning Catherine Elroy decided to quit was the same morning James Calloway walked into her bakery for the first time. It was early November in Glasgow, 2019. The city smelled like rain and diesel. Catherine had been awake since 4, the way she always was, measuring flour by feel and watching the street lamps blur against the wet windows of Elroy and Daughters. The sign above the door still said her grandmother's name. The debt inside was entirely her own. She had the resignation in her head already. The words lined up like loaves on a rack. She was going to close. She was going to sell the equipment, settle what she could, and find a quiet job somewhere that did not ask everything of her and give back almost nothing. And then the door opened. James Calloway was tall and distracted, carrying a laptop bag that was clearly too heavy for the way he was holding it. He looked at the display case the way people look at things they did not expect to need. He ordered a coffee and a croissant without sitting down, and when Catherine slid them across the counter, he looked at her for the first time and said, "Sorry, I never asked your name." She told him. He told her his. He sat down. He came back the next morning and the morning after that. James was an architect, not the kind with a tidy office and local clients. He worked for a firm that sent him to wherever the project was, which meant he had been, in the last 3 years, in Lisbon and Helsinki and Abu Dhabi. He was in Glasgow for 4 months, a residential development on the river. He said it without drama, just information, but Catherine heard the clock underneath it. She told herself that was good. A man with an end date was a man who could not disappoint her slowly. Her former partner David had taken 4 years to leave. 4 years of almost, and maybe, and we will figure it out, until one morning she understood that she had built her entire life around a future that he had stopped believing in long before she did. She had poured that grief into the bakery, into proving something. She was still pouring. So she kept James at a careful distance. Friendly. Professional. She remembered his order. She asked about his work without asking about his life. And he, to his credit, did not push. He would sit at the corner table and sketch on paper. Real paper with a real pencil, which she found unexpectedly moving. Sometimes he would show her something. The curve of a staircase. A window facing the wrong direction on purpose, to catch a specific afternoon light. One evening in December he stayed until closing time, not waiting for her. Just absorbed in his work, and she had forgotten he was there until she turned off the main lights and found him still in the corner, looking up, embarrassed. She offered him the last slice of a walnut cake she had been going to throw away. He ate it standing at the counter while she wiped down the machines. They talked for an hour about nothing important. His mother's house in Inverness. Her grandmother's recipe for the shortbread that had started all of this. The specific silence of a city at 7 in the evening, when the workers have gone home and the night crowd has not arrived yet. She locked up and they walked in the same direction for 2 blocks before splitting off. He did not ask for her number. She did not offer it. But something had shifted. She felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Through January and into February, the visits became longer. The conversation became sharper, more honest. He told her about a building he had designed early in his career in Dublin that had been torn down after 10 years because of a zoning change. He had not talked about it to anyone. She told him about the morning she found her grandmother's handwritten notes tucked inside an old tin and realized she had been making the scones slightly wrong for 3 years. Small confessions. The kind that matter more than they sound. She began to notice the way he made space for her sentences. The way he looked at her when she was not looking at him. The way he always left a small tip even when he had ordered almost nothing, quietly, like he was embarrassed by the kindness. She was falling. She knew exactly what it was and she could not stop it, and she was furious at herself for not stopping it. Then, in the second week of February, her business partner Helen found the error. It was not Catherine's mistake. That was the brutal part. A supplier had been overbilling them for 14 months, small amounts, inconsistent enough to hide in the quarterly reports. The total was significant. Significant enough that Catherine had to sit down when she heard the number. Significant enough that closing the bakery was no longer just a quiet plan in her head. It was a real and immediate possibility. She did not tell James. She did not know why, except that telling him felt like asking for something she had no right to ask for. He was leaving in 6 weeks. His project was nearly done. She'd seen the drawings on his table. The final presentation was scheduled for late March. She pulled back instead. Shorter conversations, earlier closes. She told herself she was protecting herself. She told herself she was being practical. James noticed immediately. He did not say anything for a week. Then one morning, when the bakery was quiet and she was pretending to reorganize the shelf behind the register, he put down his pencil and said, "I think I did something wrong, and I do not know what it was." She turned around. He was watching her with that careful, open expression that she had come to understand was not his professional face. It was the real one. She told him everything. The supplier, the debt, the decision she had been circling for months. She told him about her grandmother and the sign above the door and the feeling of being responsible for something that belonged to more than just her. And then Because she had already said too much to stop, she told him about David, about what it had cost her to trust slowly and lose everything anyway. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I did not come here just for the croissants, Catherine. It should have been a light moment." It was not. It was the kind of sentence that opens a door and leaves it open. She did not answer. She was too afraid of what she would say if she did. He left that morning without pressing her, but the next day he brought her something. Not a gift, not flowers. He brought her the name of a commercial mediation firm that specialized in supplier disputes. He had found it the night before. He did not say much about it. He just slid the paper across the counter and ordered his coffee. She stared at that paper for a long time after he left. The mediation worked. Not instantly, not cleanly, but within 3 weeks the supplier had acknowledged the error and a repayment schedule had been agreed. The bakery was not saved, not yet, but it was not lost. There was a path. A real one. And then James told her his contract had been extended. Not in Glasgow. In Edinburgh. 3 more months, a new project, starting in April. He was leaving in 9 days. She heard the news, the way you hear something you were already braced for. She smiled. She said that was wonderful. She believed it, mostly. That night she cried in her car in the car park behind the bakery. Not for long. She was not a woman who allowed herself long grief in car parks. But long enough to understand that she had made a mistake by letting herself feel it, and that she would not recover from this one as cleanly as she had recovered from others. The next morning, James arrived before she had unlocked the door. He was standing outside in the November cold, though it was March now, the cold still holding on. He had his hands in his pockets and he looked, for the first time since she had known him, uncertain. Not distracted, uncertain. She let him in. She started the machines. He stood at the counter and watched her work, and she could feel him finding the words. Finally he said, "I have been offered a position in Edinburgh. A permanent one. My firm opened a studio there last year. I have been turning it down for 2 years because I did not want to stop moving. I told myself I needed to see everything first before I could choose anywhere." She stopped what she was doing. He said, "Edinburgh is 45 minutes from Glasgow by train." She looked at him. He said, "I am not asking you to make any decisions. I am telling you that I made one. I told them yes this morning. I am going to stop moving. I wanted you to know before I left. I wanted you to have that, whatever you do with it." She had spent 4 years following someone else's pace, waiting for a man who was never quite ready. She had promised herself she would never do it again. She had kept that promise by keeping everyone at a careful distance and calling it wisdom. But James had not asked her to wait. He had not promised and retreated. He had shown her something real, in real time, and left the door open without standing in it. She came around the counter. She stood in front of him and she said, "I am terrible at not worrying. I want you to know that before anything else. I will worry about the bakery and the debt and whether things are working, even when they are clearly working. I am not easy." He said, "I know. I have been watching you run this place for 4 months." She said, 45 minutes is not very far." He said, "No, it is not." She reached up and adjusted the collar of his coat, which was slightly turned. A small, ordinary gesture. The kind a person makes when they have decided something. 2 years later, Elroy and Daughters was not just surviving. It had a second location. A small one, in Edinburgh, near the studio where James spent most of his days drawing windows to catch the specific light that most people would never think to notice. The Edinburgh sign did not say her grandmother's name. It said something new. Catherine had chosen that on purpose, and on a Saturday morning in late autumn, James came in before opening, the way he always did when he was in Glasgow, and sat at the corner table with his paper and his pencil. Catherine put a coffee in front of him without being asked. He looked up at her the way he always did, with that careful, real expression that she had learned, finally, to receive without stepping back from it. The city outside was gray and wet and completely itself. The kind of morning that asks nothing of you and gives you everything anyway. She went back to work. He went back to his drawing. The door was unlocked. The lights were on. And for the first time in longer than she could measure, nothing was missing.